So I'm coming from a bit of a different place with this one because usually when you think about fans of Emily Blunt, for instance, if there is one movie on her filmography that her fans probably know front to back, sideways and diagonal, all that, there's a good chance that it's this one. And they know all the ins and outs of it. They've seen it God knows how many times. Even though I'm as big a fan of her as I am, I have only seen The Devil Wears Prada maybe 4 times, which for any movie is a decent amount. But as I said, in this case, it probably seems a bit minuscule. So while I'm kind of nervous about this because it's like I don't know if I'm gonna skip over something that's blatantly obvious to like hundreds of other people or whatever, but I will just approach this as I approach just about anything else, and we'll see what happens. So what I really like about the opening of it is the fact that this movie is so, and even if it does sort of maybe negatively affect the pace much later on, this movie is not fucking around as soon as it starts. And which is really great also because it kind of sort of mirrors the rush of a Miranda Priestley arrival, the pace that this movie is going at the very start of it, introducing everything. Because there are a bunch of characters to introduce that usually in any other movie would have like a whole lot of build-up, or at least some kind of intro that establishes that they're going to be a crucial character. Like if you want to start with obviously there's Hathaway, but then there's her relationship with Adrian Grenier as her boyfriend. So it's like, how do you establish that very quickly? We get her kissing him goodbye in the opening credit sequence as she's rushing out the door. And interestingly enough, that's all we need, especially since that whole storyline may not be the strongest aspect of this movie. But then when you get to her getting to work, there is the whole thing of how do you establish these characters as fast as they do, and they still have the impact that they do? Because characters like Miranda and Emily, they're like, you would think there would be some sort of big, build up to them, at least mildly for Emily and then definitely for Miranda. But the interesting thing is we do kind of get that, just extremely in fast forward, in an effective way. So once Emily is introduced, we sort of immediately get a vibe of her. Like she has like the passive aggressive insults, just the way she looks Andy over is just pretty much says everything about this character, and we pretty much get to know her in the same way that we don't realize just how much of an amplified version of her Miranda is before we've met her. We just get this glimpse of Emily as she is, and then it's only when we realize once Miranda shows up that there's something even bigger like this coming, and Emily's just like, the small fish in the big pond when Miranda's around, but seems like the other way around when it's just her before we've met Miranda. But once again, the interesting thing about this movie is there is a huge build-up to Miranda, but at the same time, I swear to God, if you look, it is the movie has been on for 5 minutes. 5 minutes when Miranda comes into it, which seems like it's no build-up whatsoever. But you have this scene that's pretty much instantly legendary. And when I say instantly, that would be even before the movie came out. Because I do have this vivid memory of the whole scene of, we have, Tucci's immortal delivery of gird your loins and everybody running around, and then Streep appearing, and then that whole scene, the way it plays out. And that this whole scene, pretty much uninterrupted by itself, was the first trailer for this. Like, I can't remember exactly how long. It felt like a long time between the trailer and when it actually came out. And to me, there was sort of something almost mysterious about that. It was so bizarre for a movie to just use an entire scene as a trailer as opposed to the typical format. So there's obviously really something magical going on here in this scene alone. And it's obviously introducing this character in this really big way. When, like I said, the movie's practically starting, but it still somehow feels like that the build-up work. Like, this is almost like the same, it has the same effect as if the character had been built up for 45 minutes before we met her, just in this one scene as we're building up to her getting to their floor. So once we get to that, we get to see what Streep is going to do here. it is interesting that, obviously it's another Streep Oscar nomination, and she's considered the big centerpiece of the whole thing, despite the fact that it's weird how little it kind of feels like she's in it, especially with Hathaway basically being the main focus. And with characters like Emily surprisingly getting a lot of focus also. But the thing here is, not only is it just, like, I think it has a lot to do with the casting as well, because you just get that idea in general that Streep is herself, without even being in the character, is one of those presences that everybody just sort of, like, sort of the same way where if Streep walks into a room, then it's this big of a deal. She may not hurl insults at you in real life, but you do still get the same sense that it's like this whole admiration thing and a bit of an intimidation thing that just really works. And also the way it sort of feels connected to her when you look up exactly what all her contributions were. Even big or small, still really come through. Like, a couple that stand out are the idea that apparently it was her idea to have the... to me, this feels like it would seem like an obvious choice, but apparently this isn't the way that it was until Streep suggested it. When we finally get the scene where we see Miranda in a different light, like, it's... In any other movie, this would or any other character, this would still seem like it was a character that was a bit guarded. But this is basically the scene of Miranda being vulnerable. And the whole idea of going without makeup and just making her look like everything is on the table, but at the same time there's still something guarded about it also. Which is one of the stronger scenes of the movie, especially since the way we've seen the character. It almost feels like it's all the build-up for these like, very few and far between scenes where she's, like, vulnerable and broken. And even then seems like she's trying her best to not show that whatsoever. And then also the other scene where she's about as open as we're going to see her in the very end in the car with Andy, when she says, the line is, "Everybody wants to be us," when apparently the line was, "Everybody wants to be me," but it was Streep's idea to maybe not make her that self-absorbed and actually give... And it really adds that humanity that we really need to see in this character, particularly this late into it with her pretty much next to last scene. And really just structure-wise, it's just this perfect, you know, composition of character, what they were able to do with this, and especially since Streep not only brought the character to life, but added so much to that herself also. And like I said, the casting choice really could have just spoken for itself, but the fact that she would go the extra mile and add those things just makes it even better. And that's not to say that Hathaway is, like, overshadowed. She does definitely have to hold her own, not just in the Streep scenes, but also the fact that Blunt's doing a star-making turn here, and she's kind of in the middle of it, while having to be the main character. And it is much like Streep's case, but maybe not as much... because I don't want to take away anything with how good Hathaway is, but it is, like, I do feel like the casting is kind of what really made it work just in general, particularly with how at the time she was still mainly known, I think, for, like, The Princess Diaries, so she would have been, well, no, this was the year after Brokeback, but still, where she had, like, the sort of same transformative type of role where it's she's obviously got a bit of what this movie considers the homely look, I guess, into looking more like glamorous Anne Hathaway, while maintaining that character. But I do want to... Actually, I'll come back around to that a little more, of things that I like that Hathaway did, but I'm just kind of in a big old hurry to get to Blunt. So, the thing here is... another thing that works, that Streep does, that goes into the Blunt thing, is... this moment towards the beginning when, like I was saying, we kind of... Emily almost seems like she's the one that's the intimidating one, until Miranda walks into the room, and one of the first things Miranda does is, like, cut Emily down, and it's in that moment that we realize just how, you know, big and intimidating Miranda really is, that a character like Emily, who we've only known for, like, 30 seconds, but has been established so well that we're already kind of intimidated by her, but then, in this particular moment when... she's basically trying to get Hathaway out of the building as fast as possible and say, you know, she's a disaster, we can just send her off. Miranda just cuts her off and says, I'll do this myself because the last two you sent in were inadequate. And it's like, you just see, like, it's like her whole purpose for living is gone now in just that one sort of cut-off moment. So, and then going into that, you do kind of see the back and forth with Blunt's character, how she interacts with Hathaway and how she interacts with Streep, and how totally different those things are, and how she views these two different people is kind of the core of her character. Because you've got the moments with Miranda where it's but it's still, like, it may seem a bit almost sad and pathetic, but the great thing that Blunt does here, and the reason she was cast, to my understanding, like, the producer, when she saw her audition tape, the thing that she liked about her was her sense of humor, and how that's kind of the direction they wanted to take this. So you have these moments where, like I said, would seem sad and pathetic in another character, but Blunt finds a way to make them actually funny. And even if it's just saying, like, one or two words. Like, one that's always stood out to me was when Hathaway is late bringing the coffee in, and Streep says, where's the coffee? Did she die or something? And Emily is so obedient that she answers that question as if it's not an exaggeration. She just says no, but the fact that she answered that question as if it was serious just kind of shows how obedient she is to Miranda's character. And the thing throughout the entire movie, even if you just kind of look in the background occasionally, and it's sometimes more subtle than in other scenes, how she just kind of has this constant presence in the office, how she's just, like, constantly perched like a hawk and kind of looking out she so badly wants to catch the moment that Andy's going to get ripped to shreds by Miranda, and she's just waiting for it. So she's always either, even if she's not prominent, sometimes she'll just be looming around and just waiting. And I just sort of love that sort of constant presence that actually says, even when she's just standing in the background being silent, it says so much about the character, is what I'm saying. And as I was saying, those perfect little insults that she manages to come up with, sometimes cracking herself up, like the hideous skirt convention line is always one that stood out. But the thing also is that the way she uses, like, these petty sort of expressions too, on top of those sort of passive-aggressive comments. But the way that you get to see these progress into something more as the movie goes on, and the more Andy gets attention and the less Emily does. So we have the moment when Andy is co-invited to be at the gathering, and there's that look on Blunt's face when she realizes that it's not just her, and there's just, like, this look of hatred that just seems straight from the depths of hell. But then there's also, like, right after that, it sort of devolves into this look of, like, she's, like, everything's been taken away from her just because somebody is getting not even all the credit, just co-credit. It just feels like everything has been stripped of her. But then you get these scenes that sort of make me think that Emily might be one of the more, like, misunderstood characters in movie history. Because you do have the scene when they do get there, and she has the whole one stomach away from goal weight line, but there's the moment just before that when Andy compliments her and says, like, you look so thin. And that reaction is, like, the first real genuine reaction we seem to get out of her. And it's like she basically looks like she won the lottery, being complimented on how thin she looks. And the thing about this is that it feels like there's something, like I said, it's almost like that compliment almost made her bring her guard down. And it's like, I feel like you could watch this movie strictly looking at the Emily character and realizing that there's two different things here. Like, you could watch this movie entirely and pay attention to her and think she's the funniest character in the movie. And you can watch it again and pay attention to her character and imagine that she's the saddest character in the movie also. And it's given that I always felt like Emily was sort of a character that was like this wasn't always her, like, the job sort of made her this way, which is sort of what is interesting about what they end up doing with the Andy character, because it almost seems like they're two separate people going in two separate directions, but could have gone in the same direction so easily. Where it's like you almost expect throughout the movie, this is another thing I was saying about Hathaway, is it's like the Hathaway character could have so easily, the whole direction they could have gone is that she was becoming Emily, and then that's basically what the conflict would be, and then she has to find herself again. but the fact that she is able to, like, remain herself, and that obviously Miranda sees something in her that she clearly didn't see in Emily because she's much more dismissive of her, and sees Andy as this. She even says the line at the end, like, I see myself in you, or something. And it leads me to believe that, like, Emily was once, like, weak, and she wasn't as under the surface level strong as Andy is, which is what made her able to stay herself throughout this. Even the scene where she has to tell Emily that she's basically been replaced, and there's, like, in another movie she probably would have, like, found, like, would have been excited to do that, and this would have been, like, Emily's big comeuppance or something. But it, like, tears her up that she's the one that has to do that, because she's still got that humanity in her and still sees Emily as a person despite how she's been treated by her. And it feels like that the Emily character wasn't that strong when she got this job, and she may have started off like Andy but ended up as she is now, as opposed to maintaining who she may have once been. So sometimes that means that the movie goes in some directions that I may not necessarily agree with, like apparently Emily being struck by a car while she's doing everything she possibly can, just when she's about to be informed that she's basically being shut down. And that's taken as a slapstick moment, more or less, that she's hospitalized, getting hit by a car, and it's still playing that, like, doop-de-doo music while this happens. And the scene when she's, in the hospital bed and she's, like, eating everything she can find, and it's like, how can you possibly get this job? You eat carbs. And like I said, you can just look at this in those two different ways. This is either one of the funnier moments in the movie, or this is, like, heartbreakingly sad for her, that this is how she basically views her life and own body now, that it's just part of that. But I do feel like the movie gears itself much more in, like they never want to show that human side of Emily, that I'm pretty sure, that just feels so much like it's alluding to the fact that it is in there somewhere. But she's basically just treated as, like I keep forgetting there's that final scene where she's, like, on the crutches and takes the call, and she gets the clothes from Paris and all that, because it's like, I don't believe she has a scene after the hospital until then, and it's like, it's almost like the way a villain would leave a comedy. So it's, I don't know, I always felt that was maybe a bit miscalculated, or maybe that's bringing more to it than she needed to. I don't know, but that's kind of how I've always seen the character. I feel like the movie's maybe just a bit too dismissive of how they treat her, obviously mirroring the way she treats other characters, and that's probably the reason for that, but still, I feel like there's more to her than the movie is showing us. I have no idea what's in the source material and how much they go into that, but the only thing I know about the source material, as far as she's concerned, is they decided to let Blunt keep her accent as opposed to making her American like she was. But apart from that, the source material is, I have no idea what the differences are. So yeah, that's pretty much how I feel about that character and her performance. So I'd like to go on to Stanley Tucci real quick before we go into other stuff also, because obviously he's kind of another one of those faces you immediately, like when you look at certain actors and you associate them with certain movies, obviously, I've known who Stanley Tucci was since I was like 3 because of Beethoven, but now it's like almost impossible to not see his character here the first glimpse you get of him. And there's always, like, he's always he also played Streep's husband, I believe, in Julie and Julia, and it's like, I don't know that with all of the actors that Streep has worked with in her career, I don't know if she's had better chemistry than she does with Tucci in both those movies combined. And the thing about his character is, at first he seems like he's pretty much on the same level as Miranda, especially the way he sort of, almost, like, is taken aback every time he sees Andy, just because she looks so, well, to most people, normal, but in this environment, not so much. And the way he just kind of says, who is that sad little person? And the thing, though, is that what I really love about this character, and what makes Tucci the perfect casting choice, is that he's able to add just that tiny little bit of warmth to it, where it's like, as we go on, his character becomes more and more likable with every new scene that he has, and I think that's the way that he sort of warms up to Andy throughout it too, because he's obviously very direct always, but as it goes on, it's like he's he's direct, but he's not overly harsh or overbearing, even if he might seem like that when we first meet him. And even some things, when you like watch them back, like when you see when you know the direction his character's going, you'll see things differently. Like when they're in the cafeteria and he just straight up throws her lunch away right after she got it because she's going somewhere else, and it's like the first time around you think he's just another dick. He's like, you know, basically like the male version of Miranda in this world, this building anyway. But then once you know where his character's going, you're kind of like, well, in a way, he's like helping her. Like that's his version of helping her because it's gonna make her move faster because she's late, which is what he's just informed her of. So it's even those things that make him seem like he's that kind of character can almost be seen as endearing if you look at it from the other perspective when you know more about his character. So I've always really loved him here also. And then the thing though is that what I was talking about with the direction Andy's character could have gone. Obviously, and I alluded to this a little bit ago, if there's one weakness that this movie really has, it's pretty much anything involving Andy's personal life. Whether it be the whole Adrian Grenier thing where he's like this... I mean, he could be... There are so many worse movie boyfriends or romantic comedy boyfriends or all that, but... I mean, there is also something that's just like, you know... every now and then he might come off as like maybe a bit of a little bitch, but still... when it's not those scenes, it's the scenes with her friends, like Tracy Toms and all them. And there is something that's like, there's, as far as character goes, because the character is in, I mean, maybe there's something going on here in regards to the contrast in her worlds, but even so, even if you take the, you know, the characters out of the fashion world, out of this story, and you just strictly look at her friends as characters, there's still like a lot lacking here. Like they still could be more interesting than they are, but they're really just here to sort of provide conflict, more or less. But especially forced conflict too, because the thing I was talking about, where I feel like Andy doesn't really change like much. I mean, the most that she does is the whole eyeliner thing, where like you can see her eyeliner getting thicker throughout the movie the more she gets pulled into the world, and then when she meets Adrian Grenier at the end, when she's out of it, it's like not there at all. Apart from that, I don't really feel like there's much of a character change in her, but good God almighty, do her friends and boyfriend want you to think there is, and the movie wants you to think there is through them. But it's always been kind of confusing to me when, like, this whole scene where Tracy Toms, like, blows up at her and says she's a different person now. I don't really see that very much. But like I said, you know, it needs some kind of forced conflict because... So, obviously, as far as conflict goes, the much more interesting side of this movie are those scenes where she has those, like... Just kind of those little individual missions, like the whole segment with the Harry Potter book is just fantastic and so well done. And as it sort of like keeps revealing onto itself more and more the more it goes on, like just how far above and beyond she went. It seems like that really work, and that's also where you'll notice that a real huge star of this movie is the editing also, because obviously there's going to be a lot of montages, especially in the opening when we see they're showing off the hecticness of her job, and every time Miranda comes in and throws the shit on her desk and all that. Or like the scenes, like I said, those individual missions, like the Harry Potter book, all that. And because there's definitely a certain snappiness to it, because there's also that sort of snappiness in the dialogue, where like there's so many memorable lines in this, and they have to be delivered just right, and they are, because this cast is fucking perfect. And obviously that's the thing, is it's not necessarily that one is enhancing the other, but it feels like they're working together. Like, the editing is enhancing the snappiness of the dialogue, and the dialogue is enhancing the editing as well, and they're all just kind of working together as this movie moves along. Like I said, every now and then we reach a pace problem, because it's almost like it's going too quickly, too fast at the start, or at least in the first half. But that also might have to do with some storylines, like... I feel like the whole Simon Baker thing is kind of not all that necessary, because it is sort of like... I mean, they do set it up as a potential conflict, because she does have her boyfriend, and he's constantly saying, like, you know, hey, if you didn't have a boyfriend, or hey, you should dump your stupid boyfriend, and stuff like that. And he's like way too direct and way too, like, almost put on charming, so it's sort of like... And it's like almost way towards the end that it comes out exactly what he's doing, and it's sort of like, did anybody look at him and like not think he was going to be some sort of shady? And it's like just how much they go into that, and it's like just because she broke up with her boyfriend, is bringing him into the story really going to make it any less predictable where all this is going? Um, so stuff like that could probably go, but so once again, pretty much. I mean, I guess he's kind of the whole. He's the one that kind of gets to both be in the fashion side of her life and the personal life, but yeah, still the personal life thing, which, like I said, could feels like it could be axed or like extremely cut down or not just be full of forced conflicts. If it was going to be as interesting, or at least almost as it was probably never going to be as interesting as her job side, but and yeah, that's another thing too. Like if the movie's going to depict this way, it's like if she's going to take her job over her personal life. I mean, if these are her friends and that's her boyfriend, there's a lot more interesting things that could be happening in her life if she just said fuck them. I know that would be out of character for her, and that would also once it maybe make her an Emily in the end. But still, there definitely probably could have been some strengthening there to kind of give. It wouldn't give the movie as much of a sort of predictable feel that it has, because it is something that you kind of leave the movie with a little bit. So that's kind of an issue. But I mean, for the most part, it is extremely entertaining. It can be really funny. It's got a lot of witty dialogue and all that. It does go into the whole doing a satire on the industry thing, which it does feel like it's kind of holding back a little bit on that, where it really could have gone for it. But there's the whole thing about it's one of those movies where it's like Miranda Priestley may or may not be Anna Wintour, and it's like one of those movies where it's like, oh, I promise you, we are totally not that person at all, that real person. No, we are not that at all, but everybody knows the truth. And apparently she did eventually see the movie and like it, but I guess the thing was that a lot of industry people were like afraid if they were going to be involved in it, like what would happen to them career-wise if they pissed off Anna Wintour. So it's like when they went for the satire angle, they didn't quite take as big of a bite as they could have. So you can kind of feel them holding back a little bit. So that could have probably given the movie a whole other reputation if it just really went for it in that regard and just was like this. Sure, some sort of loving factor, but also kind of a big fuck you too, in certain senses. But as is, it's still perfectly fine, which is mainly from the strong characters and most of the characters being strong, and particularly the really strong performances, and of course made a star out of Emily Blunt, which we are all incredibly grateful for. So yeah, that's what that is. We only have a few more of these. I'm going to talk about, like I said, a few of the TV episodes that she did, and then My Summer of Love, and then Mary Poppins, and we'll be done with this. So, yeah, so I don't think I have much else to say about this, so until that, that's it.